Welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Friday Night Chat Show. It's got to be the best day of the week, right? Friday, or maybe a Saturday. I'm not too sure. But anyway, welcome to the show. And again, we have a fantastic guest for you lined up tonight, back in the crime and thriller genre, which is always exciting for us guys. And amazingly, this person is from the UK, but lives in New York at the moment, which is fantastic for a lot of the listeners and viewers of this show who are from America. There'll be a lot to talk about in that respect, and it's quite exciting. So that guest is going to be on very shortly. We have got a few guests lined up in the next couple of weeks that I'm very excited about as well. So it's a really good time, and there's lots of changes. You may have noticed, if you didn't pick up on the whole Author of the Month book club, I spoke about this last week, but what I am looking forward to now is getting the readers involved in this book club. And there's going to be a few things offered to those readers that kind of stick around and get involved with that process, because the whole reason it's there is to grow a support system for the indie authors in the community, which is something that we all rely on. And there will be like t-shirts involved and hopefully badges and some rewards for you guys if you become readers of the book club too. So look out for that on the website and definitely check it out if you haven't already. So thank you very much for doing that. All of you in the chat, as always, thank you for taking your time to come and chat in the group. I know you have a great time, and the conversations that develop in there are often distracting for me, but it's very entertaining nonetheless. And I'm sure you'll have some great questions. So what the show platform is, if you haven't seen this, there's 3 parts to the show. The first one being the road to writing. So we figure out exactly what that person has done up to this point and how they got to this point. Then we have What's the Story? We talk about current projects and what the future may hold. And then we finish the show with questions from yourself. So in the end of the show, in the chat, put some questions, submit them in there, and we will ask them and see what the answers are. So without me babbling too much, let me get tonight's guest on. So tonight's guest is the author of, as I mentioned, crime writer, and the author of around 6 novels at the moment, and titles include Before We Met, Critical Incidents, and most recently Risk of Harm, which has been fantastically received. The best-selling Before We Met was a Richard and Judy Summer Book Club pick and an ITV Crime Thriller Book Club selection, as was Keep You Close. So let me introduce tonight's guest, Lucie Whitehouse. Hello to you.
Hi.
First of all, thank you so much for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure for you to take the time out of your day to come and speak with us. It really means a lot. How are you doing? How are you?
Yes, I can't hear you.
You can't hear me? That's terrible. Gone. We were just speaking before we came on air, so I'm not entirely sure why that is. Maybe take the earphones out. I'm not sure. Live TV, guys. Apologies. So Lucie has lost communications with us just now, and she's trying to work on that, I hope. So I'll ramble on. Yeah, like I mentioned, her books include A Risk of Harm is the latest, but her titles have been awarded. They've both been bestsellers. Life says I can hear you both. So she can hear us both, but we can't hear each other.
That's very strange. I can't hear you at all.
This could be one of the best shows ever, where you ask Lucy a question, what I say, and translate it, and it comes back. I don't know, but perhaps I don't know. I don't know why that is. We need to type in there. Someone could type in the chat for her to maybe check her earphone settings. Let me do that in there. This is amazing. So check. By the way, when this happened, before we came on air, we could speak to each other absolutely fine. Your settings, things to make sure. This is a good insight for you guys. Right. Ted, there you go. So I sent her a message now. But guys, in the chat, let me know. Check headphones. Yes, thank you. Let me know how your week's going. Let's chat to you very quickly when Lucy is sorting this out. How are you doing? How has your week been? And are you looking forward to the weekend? Do you have any plans? Because the weekend is the best time of the week where we can relax, unless you're working.
So weird when it was working just before. Let me see.
I'm guessing she can't hear me still.
No, still nothing.
Oh, dear me. I kind of think I know how to fix this, but can't relay the information, which is genius. So the settings. No, it's not that. So let me, can I do this? How can I do this? No, this is brilliant. Right. Share screen. This could be a thing, right? Share screen. This is a whole lesson for us all right now. Share screen. Okay. No, that doesn't work. I don't know what to say. Okay, let me put in here. Check the settings. Like, let's see if Lucy sees that one. No. Yeah, guys, let me know. What have you got planned for the weekend? At least we can talk about that very quickly. Yeah, just restart. Go for it. Restarting. This, do you know what the genius of this is? This may be live and forever on the internet, but the podcast, I can actually just delete that bit. No one could ever know, but I might leave it in because, as you know, especially if you listen to this podcast for quite a long time, we like to leave in the nonsense because it's a real thing. It is real. Have us type in the chat, Chris, and you can display it on the video for. That would be the longest interview we have ever done, and that would be crazy. But it's, it would be funny. Maybe it's a new feature we can work out for. In the meantime, while Lucy restarts her computer, let me know if you are interested in the writing prompt for the Halloween, which is quickly approaching. It's not going to be that far away. It really isn't. So what we need to do is get the writing prompt started. Of course, it will be the horror, thriller, dark kind of theme to it. And what we're going to do is we're going to pick a title, very much to last year. And I'm going to start it off. Maybe I'll start it off. Maybe I'll finish it. I'll let you guys decide that. But we're going to send it to whoever's interested. You get to write yourself a little chapter or a paragraph, or a chunky paragraph, I'd say, and then send it to the next person. They can fill out the next paragraph based on what you've written, and we'll continue that until it comes back round. Then we are going to get myself and Julie Kuzma, the queen of horror, to read this out on the night, of course, with some creepy background music as always. And hopefully we will have a very funny story for you guys to enjoy on Halloween. And there will be lots of other games. If you have any ideas for fun games for Halloween that we can play virtually, by all means, please let us know. Anya says, I am interested AF in the writing prompt. Not entirely sure what AF means. Well, I do, but I'm not going to say that out right now. Life says, I'm interested, but I've got so many things going between book, stories, art. I may have to try it anyway. This will literally be a chunky paragraph addition to the story that we already have. And I think if you look back to last year's show, it is live on YouTube somewhere. You can look back on our channel. You will see me and Mr. Hooley reading out the last year's prompt of the Horror Cafe, I think it was, which was quite incredible. And there were some amazing accents. I think we were doing American accents for that as well, which didn't go down too well. Lucy is back. Let's see if this works. Hello, Lucy.
Hello.
Hi, yes.
Oh, thank God.
We have success. I've got to say, there was there was people in the chat saying, let's pop a question up, in the chat, and then I'll put it on screen, and then you can read it and relay it. But I thought that will take a very long time.
Particularly with my typing, yes. God, I'm so sorry about that. I had no idea what.
We embrace the chaos on this show. We really do. So don't worry about it. But what I was saying was there was a big intro that, was amazing. I'll just say that, it wasn't quite that good, but it was there. And what I was asking was, I hope you're well. Thank you for joining me. It's an absolute pleasure that you do so and take the time out of your day. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm enjoying day 2 of my daughter being back at school. So
yes,
the real work is about to start. I don't know. I think you mentioned in your intro that I'm in New York. Although I'm British, but the school holidays here are insane. My daughter broke up on June the 9th and went back yesterday, so it was a full 3 months.
Wow.
And that is very challenging when you've got a super chatty 8-year-old and you're dying to work. So
that's incredible. 3 months. You can tell you're in New York, by the way, because outside my window right now in the UK, it's kind of dark now, and you have a lovely bright window there.
I have a lovely bright window and a suitably New Yorky looking set of apartment building windows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
A bit of a fire escape, I think.
Yeah. Linda says, when all else fails, restart your computer.
That's what I did. It works, Linda.
It does indeed. And I think that's kind of the thing in life, just restart always. Yeah, Lyth agrees. That is the #1 rule in IT and software development. Restart.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, as I mentioned, for you guys in the chat, thank you for joining us. Remember, when you listen to this interview, if you have questions pop up, save them for the end because we will want them, and they'll be very interesting to answer. So what we're going to do is jump into part 1 of the show, which is the road to writing, and then we will find out exactly how Lucy arrived at where she is now. So, Lucy, as we mentioned, we like to find out a backstory about the authors that come on this show, whether they're an author or a screenwriter or adventurer, whatever the case may be. We like to figure out why they are at the point they are now. So, with that in mind, how did you start your writing journey, and kind of where was the backstory of that?
Okay, well, I think I've always known that I wanted to be a writer. I mean, as long as I can remember. It started with just being a huge reader and a kind of slightly OCD-ish collecting of books as well. I remember stacking them up by my bed when I was, 6 or 7. And then that mutated into a kind of massive stationery collecting habit, which hasn't passed, and nor is the book collecting either. It's massive TBR piles everywhere in this house, and so it's constant. I knew I used to like writing stories in primary school. I did all the way up through school. When I was at university, I started writing bits and pieces, kind of small things that largely prompted by atmospheres, I think, and was kind of small things that I'd noticed, but I didn't have an idea that I thought could sustain a whole book. There were definitely sort of short story ideas and kind of slice of life pieces, but I hadn't had an idea for a novel an idea that I thought would sustain a whole novel. And then when I was about 24, I had an idea that I thought would. And in the end, I mean, I'm a great prevaricator, as my long-term editors will and agent will tell you. but in the end, I mean, it got bad. I thought, I'm never going to start this unless I just start. So I locked myself in the garden and one evening told myself I couldn't come in, locked myself out of the house in the garden, and told myself I couldn't come in until I'd written 3 pages, however bad they were.
Okay.
And so I just stopped.
When you say locked yourself in the garden, I mean, was there a shed or workspace there, or did you just sit in the garden writing?
Well, it was September, so it was
Okay.
all right. But this is when I lived in Oxford in a really really shambolic house with housemates, chaos. But we had a garden, kind of a plastic garden table, and it was there with a notebook and a pen. But it was the start. It took a lot. That was actually the beginning of my first book, The House at Midnight. It took 6 years, but I was doing other stuff. I started, my very first job out of college was as a sub-editor on a magazine, which was really useful. It was like punctuation finishing school, basically, and really really useful because magazine space is always so tight. So it taught me a lot about editing and being concise, not all of which I think carried with me into my writing, but imagine what it would have been like without that. So I started doing that. Then I realized, I mean, when I was at college, I did a lot of student journalism and I really enjoyed it. And I thought I wanted to be a journalist, and that was how I'd like to earn my living while I tried to write a book. But I quickly realized it wasn't. And a friend of mine suggested publishing. So I went to work, got a job for the audio publisher ISIS, who do the unabridged audiobooks. They at the time I worked there, back through the mists of time, it was when the kind of unabridged book took 36 cassettes and took up about 1.5 feet on the library shelf. But obviously they're flourishing now in the days of downloads. But it was great because we got sent all the new books. My there was reading, seeing, what was promising, what would make good audio, what was coming in. So a massive part of my job was reading. I mean, it was a real gift.
I imagine that meant at the time that you didn't have to, you no longer had to stack all the books next to your bed because you had the books at your, at your mercy then.
I had books at my mercy, I had books at home, I had books at work, books in bags, books all over the kitchen table. Books everywhere. I mean, nothing's really changed.
So I've got a question then. I'll jump in a little early with some questions there. And I've never been in that scenario where there's lots of books around me in terms of like in your personal life and your professional life. Were you working on things that you may have been influenced by and not realize it at the time?
I'm not sure. I think the thing that really struck me at the time, I would say that as a child and kind of a teenager reading, a lot of the things I read were old. 20th century, but not bang up to date. So the stuff that I read a lot of Daphne du Maurier, and I love Susan Cooper as 10, 11, 12-year-old. And I've just found those books. I've just been clearing out my old bedroom at my mum's house. As the joke goes, 25 years after she first asked me to do it. And I found my Susan Coopers, and I just still got a buzz kind of looking at them. Just think, wow, so good.
I bet that brought some memories back to not just the story, but how you felt at the time and where you were sat at the time of reading those stories.
Totally. I remember being kind of 10, and we read the first one at school, and I remember being haunted by the cover, which is really spooky, and just loving them. I read a lot of Penelope Lively too. Her children's books are fantastic, really good, kind of that mystery, suspense, darkness, all the good stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
So a lot of things that were kind of from the 40s, a lot of kind of things were from the 70s and 80s. And then I did classics at college. So a lot of things from, 500 BC and 200 BC, 100 BC. And I remember I was on the hunt for modern things to read all the time. When I was at college, I was horrified. I went into our library and there was a vast library with a shelf about this long of modern fiction, most of which had been donated. And I wasn't allowed to join the town library because I was a student, and they were obviously very protective of their inventory there, and they had rules about it to keep the likes of us out. So that job, I mean, coming when I was 23 when I started working there, and didn't have much of a budget. So to have all the books just coming in, arriving in padded envelopes every day, it was awesome. It was really, really a joy. So that started me thinking a lot about contemporary fiction, and everything was everything. It was everything from literary to Dan Brown to Margaret Atwood. It was the whole thing. So that was really useful. But what was happening during? Sorry, carry on.
Well, I was just going to say. So at what point from obviously having a massive love for story and for books at that time, and stepping into a world where you started working with books, but kind of had journalism on the mind almost. At what point did that kind of flip into the world where you thought, do you know what, I think I can do this myself?
I think I'd been working at ISIS for about a year when I had the idea that I thought I would start working on and see whether I could do it. I think that's a massive thing when you start writing, particularly if you're writing a novel. It's just so long that, the idea of sustaining a story for, say, 100,000 words is, you don't know whether you can do it. It's like a stamina thing in many ways, or are you going to lose confidence? And so the first time is, I definitely started with let's see what happens. But I worked on it very slowly, because when I was working at ISIS, obviously audiobooks is not a massively well-paid industry, and I was also waitressing 3 nights a week at Café Rouge. So I think fitted the writing in.
Yeah. Do you think you mentioned the audiobook kind of business then? Do you think that has changed now? Because I see audiobooks, it's kind of what I lean on at times, and I see them everywhere. So do you think that's changed a lot, or is it as like a kind of natural growth, or do you think it's kind of along the same path?
I think it's changed a lot. I think the technology has really been massive for audio. So many people listen to books now. I mean, it's great. I mean, at the time, really best-selling unabridged audiobook for us would sell 400, 500 copies. Now, that's nothing. So yeah, it's huge, and I love that books are so much more accessible. I mean, I'm in my 40s now, and my eyesight is definitely beginning to go, and I am just thrilled that books will be there, even if I get even blinder than I am already, which is blind.
Well, that's something I've never thought of, and that's a great point. People who are blind may have had stories read to them previously, but now have that option of constantly listening to stories all the time now.
Yes, exactly. Such a massive step forward. Although, shout out to the RNIB, who have a lending library of audiobooks for people who can't read for sight reasons or any other reasons. And they have been a massive resource. My grandmother was blind. And I guess that's why I think about it quite a lot. And she, they were great for her.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
really is. One thing I want to mention, just then, you said about how at the time you kind of thought, can I do this? And is writing for me almost? And in that sense, what advice may you have for someone who hasn't quite taken that step yet, who is looking to write a novel, or think they might want to write a novel? What advice would you have for them in relation to that step?
Several bits of advice, I think. The first one is just start, because you don't know until you start. And also, I would say, don't get discouraged. don't be tempted. Don't be tempted at the beginning to go back and edit before you've done too much, or reread and think, God, this is dreadful, you know. So I think it's a bit like seeing photographs of yourself, you know. You always think, oh, and I you know, in my mind that outfit looks so good, but now in reality, you know, oh God, what was I thinking? And I think it's you know, when you read fiction that's published, it's been gone over many times by the author, you know, countless times before it goes to an editor. Then it's had, you know, sort of a professional editor reading through it. And this is, you know, with your first draft, do not judge yourself by the standards of, you know, what the book's going to be like if and when you finish it. I think, speaking of how technology's changed things, I mean, I remember when I was working at the audio publisher, I found a thing on salon.com, which was The Well, and it was a community of writers, and that was completely revolutionary to me. I mean, this was just trying to work out, must have been 1999. I mean, obviously since then, you know, writers can find each other online like this. I mean, it's so great to have a way to, you know, just have an online community, because maybe you live where there are not lots of writers, or you're the only one you know who's interested in it. But this is, you know, the internet is such a great resource. And, you know, this podcast, you know, you can hear writers talking about their craft. So I think find your people online is another piece of advice. And just keep going. I always think that, and it's something I try to do myself, is not edit too much before I've got a chunk under my belt, when, you know, throwing it away would be painful, you know, in terms of time invested. And then, you know, you can't edit nothing, but you can make stuff that needs to be improved better.
Definitely. No, it's fantastic advice. It really is. One thing in relation to that was the fact that technology has advanced amazingly, and these opportunities, like, you know, on the podcast now, we've heard amazing stories from indie authors, amazing stories from the best in the business, and it really gives you that insight that you might not have had. But also, what I still realize happens, even with all this technology at your fingers, writing clubs meet up still. Yes. You know, in local towns and cities, there's still those groups of people that like to come together. Which I think is another thing that maybe something that maybe people, you know, back then people would think about internet and maybe not I'm a bit hesitant about that, but now it's kind of hesitant about meeting people in real life.
Yeah.
It's completely transformed, and I think that's fascinating.
It's fascinating, and actually that is something, speaking about writing clubs, writing groups, I belonged to one when I was writing The House at Midnight, and it was the best thing ever. When I was at college, I did a lot of student journalism, as I mentioned, and a friend that I made from that, who was also interested in writing, was doing a creative writing MA, and had formed a group with other people who were doing the MA, and one of them left to go to the big, who was American, left to come to the big writers' workshop at Iowa here, and so she asked. They were looking for a new person. She asked if I'd be interested. And frankly, I was a bit intimidated. But eventually she hassled me into doing it. And I'm really, really glad she did. It was just brilliant. It was quite formal. Yeah. I think maybe because everybody in the group was older than us. I mean, we were in our 20s, and we used to meet on a Sunday afternoon. And then she and I were going to have a cocktail afterwards, largely to kind of assuage the wounds of having your work kind of honestly critiqued, which, you know, can be hard to hear.
Yeah, it's kind of an emotional drain, because you're putting yourself out there, your adrenaline kicks in, and then afterwards you're like, oh, that was, I felt that. Yeah.
Definitely. That's the thing about writing fiction as well. I mean, I think to connect with people, you have to put yourself into it properly. But it does also mean exposing yourself to some extent.
we're pushing on part one of the show. We're not dragging out at all. We're over enjoying this part of the show, so I want to move it on very quickly.
Okay.
But I just want to ask one question based on what we're talking about.
Sure.
And when you have things online like this at your fingertips, it's very easy to gather that information, but still kind of protect your personal self and stay away from the kind of the group in reality. What does having a writer's room or writer's group in real life have that perhaps online doesn't?
I think you can read people better in person, of course. I mean, and I think that's a plus and a minus. So when you're talking to people online, then you do have that degree of protectedness. When you meet people in person, obviously you get a sense of a whole person more, and you can read. You know, as you get to know people, you know how blunt they are. So what comes across in writing is quite blunt. It's like blunt. It's like, I didn't get this at all. This character's this doesn't work for me at all. You think, oh, God. And then but when you know somebody in person, you think, oh well, they're always a bit. You can read tone and nuance perhaps more than you can in virtual chats. But I think there's advantages to both. I really do. I got a lot out of that salon.com reading, just seeing, professional writers and people who are obviously aspiring to be professional writers and good ones, just watching their process, that really helped.
Fantastic. Right. Let's move into part two of the story, part two of the show, which is What's the Story? And then we'll find out about your new book or your latest book and perhaps what's to come next. So What's the Story is the part where we find out about your latest work and perhaps what you're doing next in your career. So let us know, or the people who are watching or listening to this podcast might not know yet about your latest work, which is called Risk of Harm. Let us know the story and let's dig into that a little bit.
Sure. So Risk of Harm is the second of my new series, featuring Robin Lyons, who appeared for the first time in Critical Incidents. And she is a detective chief inspector with Homicide. In the first book, in Critical Incidents, she's actually a former DCI. She's been kicked out of the Met for failing to comply with instructions, something I know, I write from personal experience. And not so much being fired, but definitely, well, occasionally. But yes, thankfully not too often. But she is in that book. She's back in Birmingham, is where she comes from originally, and she's moved back in with her parents and her 13-year-old daughter, and she's broke and miserable. The only good thing about being back in Birmingham in that book is that her best friend's there. But within 24 hours of her being back, her best friend's killed. And of course, being a professional investigator, she investigates. And the result of that book is that she's vindicated for her sacking before the book starts. And so Risk of Harm finds her working as a DCI again, but this time permanently in Birmingham. And the thing about working in Birmingham is that the head of Force Homicide, who she's working with there, is her teenage ex, Samir, who is, possibly the only person she's ever really loved, I would say. And it's complicated.
Big spanner in the works there.
Big spanner in the works.
Yeah.
And the book Risk of Harm starts when a young woman's body is discovered in the ruins of an old factory near the city centre. And it's the start of two cases. Second body is discovered a few days afterwards. But also there's a missing girl whose father is convinced that she is another victim of whoever has killed these two. But we'll see.
We'll see, definitely.
We'll see.
Not too many spoilers just yet. So the first question that springs to mind, and I already thought about this before you mentioned it a few times there, but the fact this story, linked as well as the previous story, is in Birmingham. Why specifically was that the target area for this story?
I grew up just outside Birmingham, about 20 miles away. My dad was born in Birmingham and spent the first part of his childhood there. But also, my family goes back and back and back in Birmingham generations. And my dad, he ran our small family engineering business, which, get this the wrong way around. My dad died in 2014, and he was a really proud Brummie. And when he felt like my link to the city, and when he died, I suddenly felt the sense of loss, that I didn't have access to that information and history and sense of kind of place anymore. And so I started kind of poking around myself and reading history. And then shortly afterwards, somebody said to me, have you ever had an idea for a series character? Because my first 4 books were all standalone and slightly different. They were psychological suspense rather than crime. And without really thinking about it, I mean, this person just emailed me when I was in the library working one day, and I just emailed back saying, yeah, I'd love to write about a policewoman detective, who goes back to Birmingham kind of against her will, with lots of bad history there. And I thought, God, where did that come from? Didn't really think about it for a little while, but then, weeks, and then suddenly all these ideas for that character, that location, just started coming in. And that's for me kind of how I know when something's got legs, is when ideas start other ideas, smaller ideas, plot ideas, locations, characters start kind of attaching themselves to it. I think of it as kind of the Velcro stage, where your brain just feels like a great big bit of Velcro and stuff gets stuck on it. So
that kind of relates, it resonates in my mind, is someone, the way you're speaking about that, who comes across as a bit of a pantster. Are you that, or you were kind of a plotter?
Both.
Okay.
I think my natural instinct in life is pantser all the way. But when I was writing Before We Met, I was expecting my daughter, and my editor said, you've got to finish this book before you have a baby, otherwise it's just a nightmare, Lucy, you have to do it. And I'd sold the book on a draft, and then I got my editorial notes for it, and I just thought, I hate this book. And fixing all these editorial notes, I mean, this is a massive job, and I'm not sure I'm going to end up with a product that I like at the end of it. So I said to her, do you mind, this is the brilliant Helen Garnons-Williams was my editor for a long time. I said, do you mind if I bin this book and just keep the central idea and start again? She said, fine, but send me an outline. I was like, and that was a real challenge, because I'd never written an outline before.
Wow. Well, let me jump in there then, because there's 2 major points there. First of all, in fact, let's do point 2 first. Okay. You've written something that you sold, or writing something that you sold, and you hate the idea. First of all, you must have had courage to actually own up to that and say, look, this isn't kind of what I want. And secondly, how did you approach that without thinking, is this going to land me in crap, if I'm being honest?
Yeah.
How did you deal with that?
Being paid, and well, I like the central idea of it, which was with Before We Met was very simply it had quite a complicated start, but what it really boiled down to was, what if you end up married to somebody you barely know, who's basically been, not been honest with you at all about who and what they are.
Isn't that Marriage at First Sight, that TV program that's on now?
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's also
bonkers.
my own story,
Yeah.
I because my husband's American, which is why I live in America. We met halfway through a 90-day tourist visa. Then I had to go home. Then I came back for 3 months. Then he came to visit me 6 times, I think, over kind of a long summer. And then we got married. So it was, that's real writing from experience stuff. That was 11 years ago. And I'm happy to report that he's not a serial killer. But
so someone could have, in that scenario, could have written a romantic story off the back of that, but you decided to go down the dark route.
Oh yeah, so dark. Yeah. It's so dark. I'm a great disappointment to my mother, who's always saying, "Why can't you write something nice?
A romantic comedy, come on."
I know. Well, the comedy part of that appeals to me, but my brain just tends to darkness. It's just who I am. So yes, and going back to the question, I like the central idea. I didn't like where it was going. I hadn't plotted it. It felt untidy. It was too meandering. And I couldn't see how to fix it and end up with the book I wanted. So I had to start again. But in order to do that, I had to teach myself the plot. And that was really challenging. And I think that's something that was my 3rd book, and it was the 2nd contract I had. So I had a little bit of confidence. The first two were done. Okay. So I had that going for me. But I think something I would have struggled with in the past and at the beginning would be giving myself the kind of freedom to sit around biting the end of a pencil for 2 or 3 months, which is what it takes me to plot a book. Okay. It feels like you're just dossing around and not doing anything. But actually, it's really important work and really efficient too, because if you've got a solid framework, that you're not going to write yourself off, into some kind of corner or plot hole that you can't get out of, and you'll end up throwing away a month's work because you've written yourself into a corner. So yeah, that's hard when you're starting, I think, but it is a good thing. And a recommendation I would have is go to screenwriting books for kind of strong sort of framework for plotting novels. Really useful.
I bet. Yeah, that makes total sense. Much more to the point, much more direct, and obviously you can build around that. But that's some great advice. Lazy Art Thor. I just went through that myself. Thought I had only gotten through the first chapter before I figured it out. So people can relate to the fact they have those struggles. I don't want to sound stupidly stereotypically British, but like the picture I had in my mind of New York and what I've seen in the films, we've had screeching cars, car beeping, and sirens in the background now.
Oh, good.
In the background of your building, I imagine a cartoon or a comic book playing out behind you. Is it like that, or I'm just making that up now?
It's quite like that, I have to say. We live in Brooklyn, and I think we live on the wildest block in Brooklyn. It's crazy. I don't know. It's perfect for crime writing. Two people have been shot on my block while we've lived here, it's both died. And yes, it's. During COVID, more than ever, people obviously have been living on the streets, but New York is a very outside street culture anyway. But we live 2 blocks from a fire station, so that's probably the sirens you could hear. I'm so deaf to it now that I didn't even hear that. But Yeah, it's at night. The music from our neighbours. Thank God we've got an air conditioner. You know,
Is the music good?
Can be.
Okay, that's not too bad.
Yeah, one thing I really love is I live in Crown Heights, so there's a massive kind of Caribbean population here, and there's lots of the kind of lovely Spanish language music on.
Wow.
It's on Sunday nights. I think some of the kind of slightly older residents have a kind of get together dance night in the community space over the road. So there's lots of kind of I don't know what genre the music is, but it's lovely Spanish romantic sounding stuff. It's really nice.
I'm just Googling something because there's a Brooklyn bookstore that I researched once, because the dream for the WCCS is to create its own writers bar, cafe, amazing relaxation place for book launches and the podcast to go live there and people to write there and all these sort of things. But I researched one, and there was one in Brooklyn. Some woman had opened in a kind of a roughish place, and it's been amazing. It's had a lot of interest, and I just can't find it, but I'm sure. Have you ever seen that there?
There's several. I'm incredibly lucky because Brooklyn is really, really bookish. And so until COVID happened, I was writing. I had a desk in the writer's studio at the Centre for Fiction, which is in downtown Brooklyn. And that's pretty much exactly what you describe. It's a charitable foundation that has a bookshop on the ground floor and a cafe, and it has the most beautiful library upstairs.
Wow.
Also a writer's space. They do loads of events. It's gorgeous. It's a really great space. The only problem is it got too busy. So even before COVID, you had to get there really early to get a space, which was getting to be a bit of a challenge. But Emma Straub, she runs Books Magic, which is also downtown here, and they have great events. Greenlight 2, Nally Jackson, which has branches in Brooklyn and on Prince Street in Soho in Manhattan. If you're in New York, you should definitely check those out.
Well, if they want to expand to the UK and we'll be a sub contractor theirs, let them know. We're up for it. David Middleham says, in fairness, that doesn't sound that dissimilar to Birmingham.
I completely, I have had that thought. I completely agree with you. I completely agree with that.
Maybe that's why you kind of, don't really hear it. It's like, you listen to your stories, you grew up around there, and it's like a home from home.
It's home from home. Well, it really is. I mean, one of the things that I find so fascinating about the two, there's so many similarities between Brooklyn and Birmingham. So both are completely diverse, obviously, really multicultural, really kind of totally kind of just vibrant international places to live. Both are kind of post-industrial. I hadn't realized until I moved here how much of the kind of work of New York, the kind of making and shipping and that was largely Brooklyn.
Wow.
Obviously Manhattan's more offices, but out here, one of the reasons why there's so many fantastic kind of loft apartments is there were so many factories and warehouses.
That would make sense.
Yeah. It's in a way, Birmingham was always one of the things that used to exercise my dad quite a lot was how much, Birmingham was in London's shadow. But Birmingham contributes massively to the UK, and it doesn't get its props. And I feel like now Brooklyn's, really cool, but until quite recently, it was definitely the shadow sister of Manhattan. Now, a lot of people choose to live here rather than Manhattan. Me amongst them.
I think I'm pretty sure Mario is from that area. I'm quite sure. I might be making that up, but he said it was the industrial hub during the post-war years of the 20th century. Yeah. Second City woo. So
Second City was actually the original name of the book, of the first book. It was, when I sold it, it wasn't called Critical Incidents, it was called Second City.
wow.
And I wanted to keep that title, but I was advised that it wasn't crime sounding enough, so it got changed. But
Okay.
in my mind, I think of these as the Second City books.
Right, we're gonna have to move on because we're running out of time, and I'm enjoying this, so it's a bit of a shame we're gonna have to do that. No, not at all. I'm loving this conversation. But you mentioned book title, and that brought me back to the question I'd forgotten about, which was Before We Met. And you mentioned the daughter that wasn't born at the time. Was the title in relation to that?
No, it was.
I thought that's a really romantic segue to Before We Met. We haven't met yet.
Oh, it was before we met my husband, but
okay.
Not before we met my daughter. So before we met my daughter, I got more sleep, I would say, even now, and she's 8.
Oh, I know the feeling. I definitely know the feeling. Again, from Lazy Art Thor, I love to write in our local coffee shop. They have records, big black discs to play music. I think they're vinyls, right? And since we're a small community, it's always peaceful. I've never written in a coffee shop yet, and I know it's one of those romantic things a writer does. So that's on my list to do. So what about yourself, Lucy? Where's your kind of writing space, and where's your nice place to get into the zone?
Depends what I'm doing. If I'm plotting, cafes do work for me. And walking. I mean, me and so many other writers, I think. If I get stuck on a plotting question, I go walking. But when I'm writing, I need to be on my own, really, or close to it. Before I belonged to the Centre for Fiction, I worked in a brilliant women's only writers space in a kind of semi-derelict factory. And it was great because it was huge, and we all had our own desks, and you could leave stuff there overnight, and it was big enough that you had a sense of community without feeling that anyone was kind of making noise or over your shoulder, or so that was perfect. But now where I write, you're looking at it essentially. This is my house, and I wrote most of Risk of Harm at this very desk. I
think it's a very nice bright space there, and it gives you that kind of, it's got an ambience with it that we've all noticed on here as well. The fact that you've got that kind of influence that reminds you of certain areas. And again, you mentioned the warehousing thing a few times there. Does that reflect in your work? Is there a scene or a scenario in your book that has a kind of warehouse scene to it?
Yes, definitely. The one of the things with Risk of Harm, the warehouse / factory at the beginning of the book where the body's found, obviously it's a fantastic location in itself. I mean, great to describe, interesting, but also thematically really sort of important to the book, because the book is so much about what happens when things change, when a city that had been really industrially prosperous now for generations, kind of since the 80s or for decades since the 80s, has been losing that. Who are the people who get left behind, and what does it lead to? One of the things I'm really interested in is, kind of the angry white man, and, why the anger, and, what can be done, and what are the results of the anger? I mean, obviously, again, that's something not so much in Brooklyn. New York is totally Democrat, but when you're seeing those Charlottesville, those riots, the far right, this is something I think about a lot. So that the factory is both picturesque, if that's the word, but also but totally thematically tied in too, sort of at what comes from the ruins.
Wow.
So
Fascinating. That really is. We're gonna have to push on. We got 5 minutes left of the show, which I'm gonna have to push on over. We're gonna have to go over the show's limit because we've got the last segment of the show to go, and I know the questions are coming in already, so people are gonna want to ask you questions.
sure.
But before we do that, we have to welcome a new family member to the show, which is only right, because we want to build a community and encourage new authors to get involved. So the new family member, I will play the video, and then I'll introduce the family member, so that the people watching can send them a GIF on Twitter to welcome them to the family and to the show. Do you know what a GIF is, Lucy?
I do know what a GIF is.
We slipped up again on Friday. Wednesday. And someone wanted to send a gift. Tan indeed wanted to send a gift. So we're going to ignore that and send a GIF, which is an animation. But you get to choose what that GIF is. So have a think about that when we play the video. And I will announce that person when we come back.
Okay.
So that is our All Faithful Darkness Circle of Sacrifice. And our new family member is someone who I engage with on Twitter, who is a young person who is in a writing space and is an advocate for mental health, which I love. People who are young being into that, because it really shows maturity of that age. So that person is Daniel Pace, I want to say Pace. And his Twitter is @Dan J. Writes, author of Prevailed Hope, a mental health poetry anthology. It just backs up what I said about him there. I am a freelance copywriter, ghostwriter, and blogger for hire, and he has only 45 followers. So please let's send him a tweet, encourage him to be part of the family, and perhaps give him some support and follow him. Lucy, what are we sending this person in form of GIF?
Ooh, that is tricky. Prevailed hope. I think a horseshoe.
Wow. Okay, you went deep with this. Most people just do what they like at the time, and a horseshoe is really thinking behind it. Let's see if there is a GIF for a horseshoe. Let us know on the chat. But say welcome to the family, all that stuff, and see if you can find a horseshoe and a GIF. If they can't, because that's a bit of a very niche request.
Sorry.
Don't worry. Is there anything else in case there is no horseshoe?
Let's have a leprechaun.
A leprechaun. That's good. So leprechaun. And just after you do that, start sending the questions in for Lucy. We haven't even asked her the regular questions, which I'm gonna throw a few in there very quickly. Okay. So we're gonna put this one in there. Any character from fiction, you can steal it, you can put it into your own work, and bring it to life. What would you do if that character in a book, whether it's yours or an adaptation, and what would you do with that character in real life?
I would choose Sidney Carton from A Tale of Two Cities, who I just love that man. He's a drunkard. He's a brainy drunkard who is redeemed by love and an act of heroic self-sacrifice. And I would bring him back to life.
Okay.
I would. I definitely would. He needs a second act. He kind of gets one, sort of.
Okay.
Dickens gives him a tiny bit of redemption, but
would you write a story for that character, or would you put them into one of your own stories already?
I put him into one of mine.
Okay, interesting. And what would you do with that character in real life?
I would give him a big love story. He needs one. He's
no. I mean, in real life, if that person came to real life, yeah.
Probably kiss him, I think.
Take him on a date. Win.
Yeah, for sure.
Winning.
Yeah, pick him up from AA and go out for dinner.
Why not? And what dinner would you go for?
Ooh, that's tricky. Korean. I think.
Korean. Okay.
Yeah.
So, if you that's a great one. If you could take the ending of anything, TV, film, literature, and change the ending, it could be for good reasons or bad reasons. What would you change the ending to?
Ooh. God, that's tricky. Oh, that's a really hard question. I'm just trying. Oh, Game of Thrones, obviously.
That's been a popular answer.
Yeah. Oh, this is what happens when you don't follow the books. I think. I mean, poor old George R.R. Martin. I think he must have been under so much pressure, and yeah, sometimes I have nightmares about that. You know, you have this massively, I mean, not from my point of view, of course, but I think for him, I just think, my God, you've got this huge HBO series going on. Everybody wants to know how it's going to end. You haven't finished it. And then they put the wrong end on.
But wasn't that down to like a hacking thing?
Was it?
I believe so. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that it was leaked and they bribed or blackmailed HBO or whoever it was. And they said, you know what? Keep your money. We're going to do our own thing. And they rewrit it. I'm sure that happened. Let us know if that's true. Or I could be completely wrong on that one.
I'm sure you're right, but I'm sure I was wrong, which I'd always thought that the screenwriters wrote the end. That, you know, the book not written yet.
Well, there's one ending at the moment that I am so anxious about, which is The Walking Dead. I'm not sure if you've ever seen it.
I have never seen it, but I would like to.
It's in season 12 now, which is 12 years of my life watching this. And kind of going back to the Lost theory or even Game of Thrones, where such a big series ends the wrong way. I'm petrified this is going to just end so disappointingly. Yeah. And it's like 12 years of my life wasted.
It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure, both for you and for the people who are making this series.
Massively.
I know.
Okay.
I'm very worried about what Ian Rankin's going to do to Rebus in the end. I don't ever want him to die.
Mario also says the ending of Lucifer, which is anticipated, is into his last season, and we on the show love Lucifer. So let's see. Yeah. My hubs is obsessed with TLD, The Lurking Dead, the Walking Dead, perhaps, I think is what that means. Okay, so let's see what else we've got there. What is your biggest fear or phobia?
This is really niche. This is the truth. It's very niche, but I am terrified of big underwater metal structures. Like, I think it's because when I was a child, we used to go to the Isle of Wight quite a lot. One night we were in a little dinghy, kind of tooling around with my cousin at night, and we hit something in the water. And that week, there had been a case where these poor people had come over from the mainland to the Isle of Wight in a speedboat, and they had hit a cable between a tug and a big ship that was being pulled, and the cable hadn't had any lights on it, and their boat had flipped up. The speedboat had flipped up, and several of them had died. Wow. And I don't know if you've I'm just now I'm having a senior moment. What's the brilliant Funny Bones, the film with Lee, another senior moment, comedian, brilliant, very mobile face with a mouth hunt. Anyway, there's a scene at the beginning of Funny Bones where a floating foot goes through the water, and I have been terrified of getting chopped up in ship's propellers ever since. It's my biggest fear. Funny Bones.
I can't see the person. Anyway, so that is perhaps or someone said Evans. Is that who it was?
Lee Evans.
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant.
So that's not the first thing that springs to mind for me. If I was out in a boat in the nighttime in the water and something bumped the boat, I would be thinking Jaws all day long.
Yeah. Well, luckily there's not many sharks down off the Isle of Wight, but there are where I swim now. So,
But you say that the waters in Britain are increasingly being visited by sharks, whales, walruses, and all sorts of things that don't usually come here. So that is changing.
not from around these parts, but
No.
well, it's the same here in. We go to Maine in the summer to visit friends, and it's really, you don't get sharks there, but now you do.
Anyway,
that's it's not good. And this weekend off the coast of New York State, I saw a whale, and that's not that common either for them to come so far in. It's
I think sharks are kind of scary. But I kind of like sharks. But at the same time, you see people these days who are in boats or in like dinghies, and there's the killer whales like bumping into them, and that is much scarier than sharks.
Yeah, that's scary. The scariest thing that's ever happened to me was being off the coast of Brazil in a little boat with a drunk captain around the legs of an oil rig.
Wow.
That was the most terrifying thing that's ever happened to me, and that plays directly into this underwater structures thing. I'm walking around the legs of an oil rig where there's no visibility because it's raining so hard.
So let me ask you this then: have you seen the new BBC series Vigil?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so a submarine, would that be something you would be terrified of or not?
Yes.
Okay.
Not from the outside. I mean, I would be scared of being chopped up by it.
Well, watch that. There's 3 episodes in on the BBC iPlayer, and it's a police detective that gets put in this scenario, who's claustrophobic, and they have to deal with this, and there's things that happen, and I think that's the story of that is fantastic already.
Okay.
So definitely. Okay, let's see a couple more. We'll get 1 or 2 questions from the community very quickly, and then we'll finish up because we're already 6 minutes past, but that is completely fine. I'm enjoying this, and as long as you're okay to carry on.
Sure.
Okay, so 2 more questions for me, then we'll get 1 or 2 from the community. What one person would you most like to interview if you ever had the opportunity?
Dead or alive? Does it have to be one or the
No,
other?
up to you. Go on.
Has to. This is so predictable, but it does have to be Shakespeare. And the reason for that is I come from Stratford-on-Avon, and I feel very, very strongly that so did he, and that there's no reason why a grammar school boy from Stratford-on-Avon can't write brilliant plays. It doesn't have to be the Earl of Southampton. And I would like to answer that question once and for all.
Fantastic answer. Absolutely. Okay, so wrapping that kind of the segment, this part of the show up, before we haven't even got into the questions from the community, there's only a couple in there, so we'll ask them. This question is, what does literary success look like for you? If you're, say, looking back on your career, and what would happiness look like to you as an author?
I think I have been very lucky and had several looks at what that looks like. Risk of Harm was the crime novel of the month in the Sunday Times in July, and that was bucket list stuff for me. So that was a success for me. Mostly, the thing that I get real joy from is when people say, I read your book, I really loved it, I couldn't put it down. It's, there's all the nice things, but success, that is the point, really. Also, I mean, from the other end of it, success as a writer, I had a couple of, actually quite a few. It was the most bizarrely, once, I got out of the pandemic kind of homeschooling bit and started having a bit of time to finish Risk of Harm, and had great long swathes that my husband made possible for me by going with my daughter to visit his sister several weekends. Then when I really, a bit of flow, when you really get flow and the words are just coming and you're really in the story, that's success for me. That's why I do it, really. Entirely well, it's not entirely selfish, but it's quite selfish. I mean, that's just sheer enjoyment. And then the unselfish bit is when people enjoy it. But yeah, the Sunday Times review was bucket list. So
yeah, it's fantastic. It really is.
Yeah.
One more I'm going to throw in for me, which I really picked up earlier. The name Robin, which is your character, which continues in this new book, Risk of Harm, is a great character name. What was the inspiration for Robin's character name?
I like the gender neutrality of it. It's unusual without being attention seeking. Sometimes I get frustrated by character names that are just, you think nobody's called that in real life.
Any examples?
I can't think of any now off the top of my head. I'll think, and when I think of one, I'll let you know. So I'll see who I can randomly insult. But yes, it's unusual without being weird, and it's a nice name. It's when you write a book, I always think about the Truman Capote thing, as that everybody, what nobody talks about with writing a book is how much typing there is involved. Having a 5-letter name is a good thing. I mean, Jack Reacher, Jack. Yeah, he knows what he's doing, that Lee child. Yeah.
Cool. Right. Let's finish off with the last segment of the show, which I'm just going to ask 2 questions from the segment because we are already 11 minutes over the show, and that is not an issue, but we got to keep it fairly inside the guidelines. But here is community questions. We're just going to pick 2, but that's fine. Here it comes. Okay, so let's get into the last section. A couple of questions, and then we'll find out where exactly you could buy Risk of Harm, and then we will finish the show up. First one from Lazy Art Thou, though, even though we've asked a few questions from that person, they've asked quite a good one. Do you listen to music or have something going on in the background whilst you focus on, I guess, writing?
Very good question, and I've either really pro one way or pro the other. Sometimes I need silence, and sometimes, particularly if I'm writing a scene with a really strong atmosphere, I like music that reflects that atmosphere. So I know the writer Kat Diamond always talks about how she listens to angry music, and sometimes when I'm writing a kind of really tense scene, I've been given to a bit of hard fi, for example, and I find Placebo very good for that, and Muse also very, very good for that kind of thing. I used to be better at it, listening to music while I wrote. I'm sure it's an age thing, so just being able to concentrate one thing at a time. But yeah, I do sometimes, yes. And actually, to create an atmosphere, or kind of to separate, to sort of create a sense of mental separation between kind of the morning and doing the school run and that kind of thing, and then kind of working at home, you need to kind of cut off that bit and like get into professional mode. I find listening to some music is a good way to do that.
Fantastic. I mean, we mentioned this many times in the show, and even on Wednesday, we mentioned sort of almost movie kind of soundtrack things, just the no vocals involved and just kind of theme songs, and how, say, Hans Zimmer plays such a massive role in so many films you can't even comprehend. If you don't really know, or if you know of Hans Zimmer but not entirely sure, look at his catalogue, and you'll be mind blown of how many films he's actually made an influence in. And when you're watching those films, you feel an emotion, and it's I'd say 70% down to the sound you're hearing. from the Romantic the Holiday to the Rain Man to the Lion King, he has done way more than you imagine, and it is such a massive influence. And we talked about how that sort of music can really be helpful for writing as well. And it's kind of outside the box, but it's worth a try. So if you do listen to that sort of music, even from listening to this, let us know. Okay, so one more question there. Let's finish up with this, and it's from Anya. Thank you, Anya. If you could have a writing studio anywhere in the world, where would you put that studio?
Oof, tricky. Difficult, because if it was somewhere really lovely, I'd find it distracting, I think. Although if you can work in New York, you can probably work anywhere. That's the most distracting place. I love the south of France. But I really I feel like my spiritual home is probably, if not Stratford-on-Avon, it's the Greek islands. For the purpose of this series, though, I would love a writing studio in Birmingham. I would just love to kind of walk through what I'm writing about. Now, whenever I come to the UK, which obviously has been, I came this summer. I was one of the last people to have to do 10 days quarantine. My husband, who came later, didn't have to do it. So it was so irritating. Yeah, I did. But yeah, whenever I'm in the UK, I'm in Birmingham.
Oh man, I think I've never been to Edinburgh. It's on my bucket list, and I've seen so many pictures, moody pictures from Ian Rankin's Twitter feed, that I think I'd love to go there and do it. It's just dark and dingy, and it almost gives that old-fashioned London Jack the Ripper style cobble street vibe to it. It almost feels medieval. It makes me, yeah. I think I'd have to have a little go there. But
I'd never been to Edinburgh until about 12 or 13 years ago. I thought, this is ridiculous. I've never been to Edinburgh. Why have I not? So I went there for a weekend and then fell in love with it. And then I ended up going there on my honeymoon. I liked it so much.
Really?
Yeah. In January, it was bracing. There was no need for a bikini.
Well, here's the question for you then. In January, in most where I live, kind of coastal towns, is pretty much quiet. What was January in Edinburgh like?
Cold.
Very cold.
We got married on January the 8th. It was really cold. There was snow on the ground when we arrived, but we also both got flu immediately.
Oh no.
Yeah, so it sucked, as they say around here. But we got better, and then it improved. But it was gorgeous, because my husband's a screenwriter, and pretty much all we do together is talk about stories and books and stuff. And
that's nice.
Yeah. So and politics. We're obsessed, negatively obsessed with Donald Trump. So that was the topic of conversation for the past 4.5 years. But before that, we used to talk about books. In pubs. It was.
I like to remain ignorantly blissful about politics. I'm just staying outside the box with that one.
Save yourself the stomach ulcer.
I know, exactly. And I don't understand it. If I did, and I'd get stressed. So let's leave it there. Okay, so before we shoot off, Lucie, where can people find your book? Because I did notice you don't have a website.
I don't. And actually, I was thinking about that this morning and thinking, it is time.
It is time.
Yeah, it is time. I need to get on that.
I'm sure someone in the community right now watching or listening to this can help you out, because we've got some talented people here.
That's amazing.
Get in touch with Lucie.
Yes, please. That would be great. I am on Twitter at LWhitehouse5, also on Facebook, Lucie Whitehouse, and Instagram, also LWhitehouse5. But yeah, no website.
Where can they buy Risk of Harm? This out now.
Anywhere. If you're looking for a good independent bookshop, I recommend West End Lane Books, NW6, London, West Hampstead. The brilliant Danny Van Emden, who runs that shop, is just spectacular. I'm sure a lot of people know her from from Twitter. She's very funny on Twitter. If you don't follow her, she also has great book recommendations and is a bit of a hub of a crime community. And of course, Amazon, always.
They're massive, right? They in lockdown alone in Britain, they profit 50% bigger in lockdown alone of a company that was already enormous. That is just ridiculous, people.
I wish I bought some stock.
Don't we all? Okay, thank you so much for that, Lucy. Just heads up, guys, next Wednesday I've got on the backstory. We'll find out the backstory of Kia Abdullah, who is a fantastic. She's already sent a promo video through, which I love. There's so much enthusiasm in there. It's going to be a fantastic show. She's the author of Take It Back and Truth Be Told, and Next of Kin, which is out now and is the Times Book of the Month. She's got a great story, and there's a lot of charity work involved in that because of her backstory. So please look out for that next week on Wednesday. But in the meantime, I will be tweeting this show, the podcast and the YouTube video later on tonight. So please show that some love and show Lucy some love. Follow her on Twitter and Facebook, of course, and pick up Risk of Harm right now, because that story is fascinating. And I'm sure we're all, as people who love the darkness, as Lucy does, will love that. But from us here, we are done, and we will see you very soon. Please stay safe. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.